Welcome back to the swamp, my friends, and welcome if you're new. Today, we're going to be sharing some creepy and downright terrifying horror stories that'll freak you out tonight. Now, as always, if you have an experience that you would like to share with the swamp, be sure to submit your story at swampdweller.net or the email you can find in the description down below. You can also go to Reddit at r/thedarkswamp and submit your story there. I'd love to see it and potentially share it with everyone here in the swamp. Now, without further ado, let's jump right into these stories after our sponsor today. I'm sure I'm not the only one that deals with having focus problems and the energy to, get done with a task. After a while, coffee wasn't really getting it done for me, and having an energy drink addiction definitely wasn't healthy. And I had been consistently and constantly searching all over the internet for something that would give me a nice focused and energetic feel without being, jittery or having too many crazy crashes. The worst thing that happens is you're drinking all this caffeine and then halfway through the day you just crash and you're just tired. You gotta get a nap in. And I don't know about you, but I don't have time for a siesta in the middle of the day. But recently I found this little shot called MagicMind that has improved my days tenfold. I love that I can take it with me anywhere and drink it wherever I need a quick energy boost without having to worry about jitters, crash, or anything unhealthy. I take it because it's so easy to incorporate into my morning routine. It tastes great and it helps me out a ton. I started drinking MagicMind, and honestly this thing became my best friend instantly. As somebody who constantly is on the go doing projects from YouTube to Netflix to wherever else, I have to constantly have my mind running on overdrive. And like I said, having to lean on a fourth cup of coffee to get you through the day isn't necessarily conducive of a healthy lifestyle. MagicMind gives me all the mental energy and focus that I need. It improves I've actually been adding it into my coffee, which improves the coffee a bunch, which allows me to drink less. So instead of having like 4 or 5 cups a day, I'm maybe having 2 max. It makes me feel more productive, more focused. It allows me to even sleep better. I'm not heavily on caffeine. I have less stress and anxiety, and I'm able to feel a bit more creative, and it's definitely even helped my memory out a little bit. The ingredients are incredibly healthy. There are a couple of really cool ingredients, but my favorite personally is the lion's mane mushrooms. They're the fluffiest mushrooms out there, another nootropic and adaptogen. It reduces anxiety and inflammation while supporting cognition by preventing neural degeneration and stimulating neural regeneration. So, swamp folk, what are you waiting for? Join me and many others today in the swamp. Be sure to go to magicmind.com/darkswamp and use code DARKSWAMP20 and get up to 56% off your subscription for the next 10 days with code DARKSWAMP20. That's all one word. Again, magicmind.com/darkswamp and use code DARKSWAMP20 for 56% off your subscription for the next 10 days. The Tall Figure on the Trail by JaeTheGuy. My neighbor M and I walked to the store and returned to our apartment complex when it was completely dark outside. It was chilly in early December, around 9:30 to 10 p.m. To get to the apartments we lived, we had to go through a stretch of road that was covered by trees and had no streetlights. Usually we can see this using the moonlight that shines through the spaces in the leaves. It had been cloudy since December, so there was very little moonlight. A small entrance to the trails leading up to the cemetery behind the apartments we lived, and we smelled something like decaying animal or something while we were walking. Honestly, we both assumed it was just a deer or something that had died, which is pretty common around the area, honestly, especially the flats where there's tons of roadkill all the time. However, M decided to point the flashlight at the entrance of the trails. We both noticed and pointed out a very tall figure crouching down. I'm 5'9", and it would have been at least eye level with me crouched. It was skinny, a pale gray in color, with long, dangling limbs, and either sunken eyes in or none at all. All I was seeing was 2 black sockets. I describe it as it looks like someone took decaying skin and stretched it all across the skeleton. We both ran until we got to M's apartment. We still don't know what we saw that night. We've tried to figure it out. We're still waiting to get answers. It's common for creepy stuff to happen at the apartments. A lot of people believe it's haunted and that cemetery belongs to something much more evil in those woods, but I'm not really too sure. This is the first time I've ever really seen anything of this level. My Scary Smithall Halls Story by LanchashireLass. This is the first time I've told anyone this story. It happened when I was just 10 years old. My Nana would take me to visit museums, halls, and places of interest during school holidays to keep me out of trouble. One of the places she took me was Smithall's Hall, which is in Bolton. It's rumored that several spirits haunt this place. One of them is often seen sitting on the front bench of the indoor chapel with his head down in prayer. Many people have claimed to have seen him and have described a water puddle next to the bench, where he places his umbrella while praying. I said earlier that my Nana took me to go visit these places to keep me out of trouble, but on this occasion, I wandered off from the tour group and up a flight of winding stairs. I walked to the end of the corridor and found myself on the chapel balcony, overlooking the stalls beneath. No one was allowed to be in there due to health and safety rules, but back then, it was a very common place for people to be. I didn't see the praying gentleman and was quite glad because I could hear the tour guide's voice trailing off in the distance. It was pretty lonely on the upper floor, and I knew my Nana would be frantic, so I rejoined the group. As I got back to the stairs, I saw a creaky old wooden door to the right of me with a big metal handle. So, curiosity killed the cat. I turned and went inside. The floorboards were uneven and rickety. There was a table, chairs, and a big wardrobe that was ancient. I opened the wardrobe, and inside were robes that the chapel choir boys had changed into on their church service days. I shut the door and turned to leave. In the corner, at the table, was a man who I immediately thought looked like William Shakespeare. We were currently studying Shakespeare back at that time in school. He had a tunic, leggings, a rough-looking collar, and a pipe with a long handle. At first, I thought it was a dummy that I had missed at first glance, but I was going to get a closer look. And as I got closer, I stopped in my tracks because it slightly turned its head, and I swear, it side-eyed me. I got freaked out. I ran for the door and screeched out loud as I flung the door open. My Nana came up the stairs furious that I had sloped off and got lost. She asked what I was doing, screaming the place down, as she put it. I told her about the man, and she went into the room to look for herself. And of course, as luck would have it, no one was there, and I got a good telling off. We rejoined the tour as they gathered around the bottom of the stairs to see a footprint, years and years old, embedded in the stone floor. It was supposed to have been done by a martyr named George Marsh, who was arrested for his religious beliefs in the area and subsequently killed. I just looked at my Nana, who was furious, and asked if George Marsh was in the room upstairs. And of course, I got told off again. I'll never forget making eye contact with the man in the funny clothes. He seemed confused, looking at me like he was seeing something he had never seen before. I've been back to that place since. I've even gone up the stairs. They have since been roped off, apparently, but I've never seen anything close to this. Something Large Was Stalking Us by John Smith 9373. This story takes place in northern New Hampshire. I am writing on my girlfriend's behalf as this happened to her, but she's told me this story on numerous occasions. I love your YouTube channel, Swamp Dweller, so I feel it's finally time that I share this brief but deeply mystifying story with the swamp folk. Back in the year of 2013, my girlfriend was a camp counselor at a camp on a lake in New Hampshire. She was staying the night alone in a cabin-type building next to the road, which is also surrounded by woods and forest for miles. As sometime during the night, while doing something on her iPad, she heard a strange knocking noise coming from just outside the cabin. Scared, she thought it could be an animal at first, but then it sounded like footsteps were going in circles around the cabin, and it definitely sounded like it was bipedal. So she began to get a little freaked out because obviously she's out in the middle of nowhere, trying to just relax, but now it sounds like there might be some strange unknown person stalking her. She hid in her small bunk until the wee hours of the morning. The whole time, these footsteps circling the cabin and never really stopping. As this strange noise kept knocking on the outside of the house as well, it was like she was being stalked by some animal, creature, or person. Who knows what was going on out there? Eventually, after hours of terror and feeling like she was surrounded by some sort of nefarious presence, she called the police. They eventually came out and they searched the area around the cabin, the dark woods, and all that stuff, but they never really found anything. I'm not even sure if they found footprints. They didn't really seem like they took it that serious. She didn't know what this thing was, but it rattled her to her core. It may have been some kind of cryptid like a Wendigo or some sort of person trying to get in and harm her, or maybe it was just an animal. Who knows? But I'm just glad she made it out alive and is okay and thriving with me today. Thanks, Swamp Dweller, if you decide to share this story. I swear it's true, and my girlfriend has been pretty terrified ever since. The Dear Witch by Anonymous. Hello, my name is Chase. I have a story from the Perry State Forest and my home that neither I nor my friends will ever forget. But before that, I do need to share a little bit of backstory. We live on a large hill bordering the Perry State Forest. My entire immediate family lived on this hill. My grandfather, aunt, uncle, cousins, my mother, father, and myself. My aunt and uncle had a medium-sized farm and raised many goats as well as free-roaming chickens. It was common for the animals to go missing. We initially thought it was due to the presence of coyotes until we captured a mountain lion on one of our trail cameras. It's worth noting that we live in southern Ohio, where mountain lions are not even supposed to be found. Yet there it was with its den in our wild woods. Strange occurrences often happen at night, such as seeing shadows, hearing loud knocks, whispers, screams, footsteps, and even hearing drums in the woods every year around Halloween. Pretty creepy. But moving forward, let's get into the meat of this story. The first encounter I remember was when I was maybe 8 years old and fell asleep late one night in my living room. We had a massive window with a TV to the left of it, in the corner of the room. I woke up and looked at the clock. It was somewhere around 3 a.m., and the TV was buzzing static. I looked out the window from the couch, and there it was. A tall man, wearing a brown cloak likely made of deer skins, and a deer head covering his face. He's standing there, very close to the window, with a little Indian girl in braids to his right. He stood there and stared at me for a long time, then waved to me in a way that said, "Come outside." After I freaked out and just sat there in shock, they both walked out of view and away from the window. I had a sudden urge to follow them, but I stayed put and cried out of fright. I then ran to my room and eventually fell asleep. The following day, I explained what had happened to me earlier that night to my mother, and she told me it was probably a friendly Indian chief who was just paying a visit, meaning no harm. I had since blocked the experience from my memory and forgot that it even happened until many years later when my mom sat me down and told me the actual, truth. The chief has been around for a long time and has terrorized everyone on the hill, staring at them from afar since they moved in at around 1999. She told me, according to her knowledge, that he was from the Adena tribe. During his time, he would collect kids from the surrounding tribes and take them away for human sacrifices. She further explained that he wasn't waving me hello. He was waving me to follow him outside with the Indian girl, to do God knows what with me once I was alone in the woods. She said, "He is evil." My mother doesn't use that word very often, but she said, "Whatever that thing is, it's pure evil. And don't ever go out in the woods alone at night. Don't ever go with friends. Stay as far away from the deep woods, because an evil lives there." And so, of course, I didn't listen. My friends and I quickly learned our lesson. My two friends, Andy and Jeremy, and I decided to have some spooky fun after a long and tedious night.
We were all 17 to 18 years old, so we hatched the plan to go into the woods, and the Perry State Forest was the perfect location. We wanted to try to scare ourselves and just mess around and have some fun. After all, roads in the forest were only a couple of miles long. For example, in a 20-minute drive, you could easily make it right into the city. It was a straight shot, one single road with no turns. We decided to drive because walking out there was just a little too ballsy for our taste. In all honesty, we just loved the rush of being spooked. Adam and Jeremy are, or at the very least were, the furthest thing from superstitious, but they didn't believe in anything unless they could see it for themselves. And that's precisely what they got. We were in my father's car, which was a manual BMW. It was a fast car and we felt so cool driving it around. The time was approaching 2:30 a.m. when we slowly went into the forest after turning off the main road. Upon entering the forest, a wave of something comes crashing over us. It felt as if we were phasing through a wall that wasn't actually there. The air just felt heavy and thick, and we felt extreme pressure on our chest. It even made our eyes tear up, and it was hard to breathe. There was no pain, just an overwhelming feeling of sadness, anger, guilt, dread, regret, and emotional distress. It felt like every bad feeling you could feel all together at once. We felt like we needed to turn around and just say forget it. But we wanted this. We wanted to feel scared. It's what we came for in the first place, is it not? So we continued driving through the weird wall of bad feelings. And we all just thought we got that weird feeling because we were in the woods at night, and it was late and dark out. It was dark out. It was a new moon, so we didn't have any light at all. It made sense at the time, yet the headlights could only see a couple of yards in front of us, which was definitely not typical for the LED lights my dad had installed. We talked about how weird the feeling was when we entered the forest. Then, out of nowhere, we saw a prominent black figure standing on the left side of the road. It just watched us drive by, and then it was gone by the time we passed it. And when I say black, it was just black. It was darker than anything I've ever seen. The darkness of the forest behind it almost looked bright in comparison. We checked the rear view mirrors and it had just vanished. Poof, it was gone. It was like it was never there in the first place. We said some obscenities to each other, wholly stunned at what we had just witnessed. We drove for about a whole minute or so in silence until Andy said,
"Did y'all see that shit?"
We all agreed with the simple, uh-huh. We continued to drive. After a while, Andy looked up at the sky and says,
Guys, the sky kind of looks off.
Me and my other friend looked up and the sky wasn't just off, it was literally blood red. Yet it was so dark in the forest that you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. We thought maybe it was starting to get daylight out, but it was only 2:32 a.m. We were perplexed at how little time had passed since we had entered, and how the sky could be lit up such dark red on Earth. At first, we thought it could be a blood moon, yet there was no moon to be seen. We continued our journey for half an hour in a straight line. Then suddenly Andy yelled and said, "Nah, dog, I swear we just passed that tree. I just saw that tree, I know I did." I denied it with a simple, "Nah, dog, like you're tripping, you know?" Eventually, after some arguing, we continued to start passing the same trees, the same guardrail, the same lake, the same signs. It honestly felt like we were seeing the same things over and over and over again. Everything kept repeating, as if we were driving in one big circle. But that was impossible since the road was only a straight line. We couldn't have taken any wrong turns because we never made a turn. So we were kind of freaked out and not knowing what to do.
"Dang, man, this feels like some Blair Witch stuff,"
Jeremy murmured, as we continued to drive through the endless loop that we were now apparently stuck in. After about 15 minutes of relative peace, other than the screams, human figures, and other horrific things happening all around us, the radio randomly switched on. We heard people talking on the radio through the static, but they weren't just like radio hosts. It was actual people. So many people were talking at once, it was deafening. We heard loud knocking and banging on the doors and windows, enough to shake the car. The voices in our heads were now screaming at us to stop driving, roll down the windows, and get
out of the car and do anything to let them in. Everything was deafening. It was so insanely loud that we all started weeping. We just gave up. We couldn't handle it anymore. Then, in the blink of an eye, we appeared on the new reservoir road before the city. We all looked at each other, utterly stunned and bewildered at how we had just teleported at the end of a dirt road out of a forest to the city. The radio was still blaring static, so we reached and turned it down so we could talk amongst ourselves. I looked and saw that the time was now 3 a.m. How did such little time pass? How did we get here? We had no clue and we still don't. We were just glad it was over. We drove back to the city. The sky slowly faded from red to black. We stopped at a 24-hour Taco Bell and got some food, sitting in the parking lot and talking about what we had just experienced.
Then, right before we were able to walk in and really enjoy ourselves, there was the figure we saw at the beginning of the drive, standing right on the edge of the property line, staring directly at us, but now we could see it in finite detail. It was about 7 feet tall, with broad shoulders and the stature of an Akeem man. He was wearing a blacker-than-black cloak and a deer skull on his head with piercing red glowing eyes. It then raised its hand to its chest and waved a single wave from his chest to his hip, then vanished into the woods behind it. We went inside, and honestly, we were kind of scared to go back to our car for quite... It took a while, but we eventually got in the car and went home. I've never experienced anything remotely like this again. But I'll tell you one thing that me and my two friends learned. Never go into the woods at night. Thanks for listening to these creepy and downright strange and disturbing horror stories that'll freak you out tonight. As always, if you have a story that you would like to share in a future episode, whether it's a strange and unexplainable encounter in the woods or something entirely different, be sure to submit your story at swampdweller.net or the email you can find in the description down below. You can also submit them on Reddit now via r/thedarkswamp. I'd love to see your story and potentially share it with everyone here in the swamp. If you're new to the swamp, why not join us? Be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications to never miss a new episode, as I upload them on multiple days every single week on all things natural and supernatural. Thank you guys so much for supporting the swamp the way you do. I couldn't do this without you guys, and I'm so appreciative to have you guys dwelling in the swamp with me. If you enjoyed these stories, please be sure to hit that like button. The more like this episode gets, the more YouTube promotes it. If you could, leave a comment, because again, the more comments this gets, the more YouTube promotes it, and that's really helpful to the swamp continuing to grow. I'll see you all soon with another creepy episode. Don't forget to join me over on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all the fun stuff, and I'll see you soon with another creepy episode.